Good morning. How are you today? Today is Monday and it is forgotten the date. I can't see it. But it's good to have you here. And we are once again here as the Mentorship Academy. In fact, hold on. Let me just put that up there. We always have our logo back there. There it is. So it's our Mentorship Academy. And once again, on a Monday here to come show up and take you through another one of our great lessons. I've been running a series around bootstrapping and exactly how you as an individual can bootstrap. How do you get yourself on the journey towards building your business solidly? In our bootstrapping lessons, I demonstrated to you, excuse me, in our bootstrapping lessons, I demonstrated to you how exactly or what exactly bootstrapping is. I say that it is basically number one, starting your business, how you start your business. Is what product or service do you have? Number two, I talked about how you validate your business, and that is who wants my product or service. Number three, how you optimize your business. How best can I produce my product or service at the best possible pricing? And number four, how do I scale my business? In other words, how do you get it to as many people as possible? So many of us are actually stuck somewhere between 3 and 4 who've been in business for over 5 years. It's usually quite a challenge to move, first of all, to optimize, because you can discover who your product or service people are, but how do you then take that from there to the place where you want to be, which is to scale? And so every Monday you have myself, Rev Walter on Mondays. On Tuesdays you have Dr. Sunshine Sylvia coming through with Mindset Change Program. Wednesdays we have the open market, and usually we also have the mompreneurs, although they're on a break for a while. And then on Thursdays we have Dr. Nelly, who comes through with Prosperity for Your Soul. I was with her over the weekend. It was good to see her. And then on Friday we have the New Image Health Tips setup, which has been doing quite well. We look forward. There's quite exciting news on that space. Now, let's jump into this next stage. So like I told you, optimizing your business. How best do you optimize? And then how best do you scale? So we're on the scaling part. And when it comes to scaling of any business, there are basically 5 factors. Okay, you need to be aware of. These are: number one, assess and strategize. Number two, seek financing, which is what we're dealing with right now. Number three, secure your sales. Number four, invest in technology or tech. And number 5, hire the right staff or strategically outsource. Now, last week we covered the first aspect. Today we continue the next one, which is number 2, which is to seek financing. Now, one of the greatest challenges MSMEs, which is micro, small, and medium enterprises, face in Zambia today has got to be this one factor: financing. Firstly, it is a fact that government has seriously crowded out the private sector when it comes to borrowing from banks, simply because it makes more sense at present. May change in the future, but at present, for any financier to lend their money to a risky sector like the SMEs, they would rather put that in government. And how do you lend to government? Through government bonds, treasury bills. Okay, so what that happens to do is it crowds out the private sector and lending. Okay, the failure rate, and again, the other factor that makes it very challenging is that the failure rate at which people are not paying back loans is quite unsustainable. And when you add to this the large domestic debt that is pending for many of these companies that have lent or forwarded money even to government through orders and service provision, the inability to pay back and the challenge with cash flows, it just makes more sense to invest in treasury bills and government bonds than it does to lend to the private sector. And that's really one of the biggest problems that we face. We can't even run away from that. Okay, with that particular factor looming, every little financing is available for most of the SMEs. Okay, and very little, rather, very, very little. As such, even though I am covering this sector, the reality is not pretty, and access levels are very tiny. We're talking about less than 5% of applicants are successful at actually acquiring sustainable lending. By the way, that's a very big deal. I'll talk about it. Furthermore, the amount of security required by most institutions is too difficult to offer up for the majority. The value of security is usually supposed to be about 3 times the amount required. So unless one has property or some valuable assets that can be used, those funds are simply not accessible. So these above factors then lead to other great challenges of undercapitalization. So let me first tackle some of those issues I've raised. You know, in this our country today, why is it, for example, we don't have very big commercial farmers? The other day I had the privilege of sitting with my mentor and we were discussing it, and I said, so what exactly is the problem with Zambia? Why don't we, why is the mining sector still the biggest income earner? Apparently we're sitting at about 75 to 76% of our revenue as a country comes from the mining sector alone. And that's why when KCM or Mopani or one of these mines has problems, it translates to serious income challenges for the country. When we export well and we're solid in our exports of copper, then we pick up. So the question is, why have we failed to diversify our economy after all these 52 years? Because this economic diversification started in Kaunda back in 1973. And the reason there was that topic was because the copper prices worldwide had gone down. There was a copper pricing crisis. And what that did to Zambia is it put us on a very bad stance. We decided to realize as a country that we need to find a way in which we can start to earn money from other, what they call non-traditional means of earning income. That story hasn't changed. So I was asking my mentor, why is this so? And he told me something that blew me away. He said that the agricultural sector needs an entire ecosystem. So I said, but what do you mean by that? Because, we had these Zimbabwean commercial farmers who came to Zambia. He said, look, the truth of the matter is that even though they've come to Zambia, they're not here permanently. They're still looking and hoping that things in Zimbabwe will change. And when the things in Zimbabwe change, they'll just go back. I said, but, so I got a bit surprised. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, look, in Zimbabwe, one of the reasons, South Africa, one of the reasons why they are so successful in the numbers and huge level commercial farming is because of ecosystems. I said, but what about Zambia? He says, well, you need 10 of those. You need 10 to 15 of those, so that we're literally a breadbasket exporting. And the reason why it worked in Zimbabwe is because you have an entire ecosystem. So I said, what do you mean? He says, that means everything from seed acquisition, fertilizers and other inputs, farm inputs, the actual planting itself and all support equipment, and then the lending that goes with that, the financing that supports all these sectors, then the marketing and selling of cash crop products. I said, so I said, well, give me an example. He says tobacco. Tobacco is a highly, highly lucrative, very lucrative space of business. And it's not just tobacco. You've got so many other crops that you could farm at a commercial level. And it's not about really the soil or the climate, because you can farm things like strawberries, you can farm oranges, you can do grapes in horticulture. That's another big area. You've got, of course, classic agriculture, beef, and all these things. Then you've got the crops themselves, soya, beans, maize, tobacco, tea, coffee. There's so many crops that you could actively utilize, and Zambia has the land, Zambia has the climate, Zambia has the water available. 40% of the water in SADC is sitting in this country. So why are we not seeing that? Answer: ecosystem. We don't have an ecosystem. So even when I talk about this financing thing, it's not a joke. Do you know why we fail to run the mines at a personal level? A lot of people say Zambia has the capacity. I'll tell you why we fail to run the mines. Answer: because we don't have open credit. We don't have big level financing. To run a typical mine like KCM or Mopani on average is between $30 to $35 million a month. And that has to be what they call a facility. Because you see, you make your sales well and good and money comes, but you've got to have a facility that allows for your day-to-day activities. And that's what really makes a huge challenge when it comes to all forms of business at this level. So in normal business, one of our biggest lifebloods is cash flow. And that means you need to have facilities available in these banking institutions where they can give you what they call, what's it called? An overdraft. So what's an overdraft? An overdraft is a facility that allows you at scale level, mainly scale level, to be able to have your operations met on a day-by-day basis without running out of money. So that's usually what tends to, cause a number of companies to become insolvent. So insolvent means they may have the sales on paper, but they do not have the cash to run. And that's what accountants' functions are. Accountants' jobs normally is to make sure they help the company, they help the organization know when expenses fall due and manage that. So they are essentially cash flow managers. So in all businesses, when we talk about seeking finance, it's not just finance to bring in the tools or bring in the equipment or pay for the stock or the crop or whatever it is, but it's the ability to remain solvent throughout the entire period. So for example, farmers will borrow at a particular place, but then they work seasonally. So that means for an entire 4, 5, 6 months, they are working on a crop. And you can't say, start paying the money next month. No, it doesn't work like that in agricultural banking. It's got to be 6 months before they start paying, knowing that when they start selling their products or their produce, then that's what's going to finance and pay back the loan. So you need specialized, banking that will handle that. You also need insurance. You need all manner of things to cover all these things. And many times cash flow becomes your problem. So this is why in finance seeking, we've got to be very mindful of how that's going to work. And when can you realistically start paying back the loan? So many times even when the business is viable, it really remains now an issue of looking at the capacity by the company, by the organization to sustain the loan, pay it back, and still be able to operate. One great mentor of mine, another one, not the one I talked to, told me something so interesting. He said, for as long as one is borrowing, I may probably say this again, for as long as one is borrowing above 15% per annum in a brick and mortar business, it's unsustainable. I'll say that again. As long as one is borrowing above 15% per annum, not per year, per month, per annum, and they're running a brick and mortar business, it is unsustainable. In short, you cannot be able to manage the costs. You will drown, you will fail, you will become insolvent because you're taking money, literally what is supposed to be recapitalized and paying the loans back. And a lot of people say the Chinese are doing it. Yes, because the Chinese are accessing far cheaper loans. They're accessing somewhere between 1 to 3% per annum as a loan when they come out here as venture capitalists. And you can imagine that money isn't just coming as a loan to pay back on a month-by-month basis, but they are given room and grace to grow the money before they have to start paying back their construction bank of China and things like that. So they don't get into that type of stress that a local business gets into. So without doubt, financing is our biggest minus as far as growing businesses in this country at the moment is concerned. Again, the risk factors make it very difficult for banks to lend. It's that simple. And imagine, I was stunned to learn that even the commercial white farmers complain about the environment. They complain about the loans. They complain about the rates. They complain about the marketing. See, we've got a tobacco marketing board, but how efficient are they at doing their marketing and storing? They don't match Zimbabwe by any standards. Zimbabwe is far more advanced. South Africa, far more advanced. Kenya, far more advanced. And that's why you see higher numbers. All you need to do is just go on your records to see who are the biggest tobacco producers in Africa. You will see. Very, very interesting. So you need to have an ecosystem that supports, and that's something that's challenging in the country. But that being said, what can we do? So like I said, the above factors then lead to another great challenge of undercapitalization. Where funding could be secured, the amount is usually smaller than what is really needed. With such a situation, it becomes even more challenging to remain sustainable or even become profitable. Okay? If typical businesses take 1 to 3 years to become sustainable, one can immediately see the danger and challenge such a scenario of borrowing less than what you actually need would pose. Add to this the fact that one has borrowed commercial loans as opposed to investment equity financing. That's different, my friends. Then you find that businesses don't have enough time to allow the capital injection to work and bear more, but must immediately begin paying back what is borrowed. And this is, to be honest, what is killing most businesses, because when the owners are looking for financing, they don't realize the implications of borrowing to start paying back immediately. Most businesses need about a year to even catch up. So this is why I always say, first, don't borrow to start. So then what does that mean? That means when you're starting your business, you do not borrow. You operate on what we call self-financing and bootstrapping, which is what I've been teaching right now. So don't go for any financing until you reach a stage where you've optimized your business and you're now looking to scale. And even then, I am very wary of the idea of scaling on borrowed money. No. So first, assess, strategize, make sure you have everything in order, then seek financing, but I'll show you how you do that. But remember, if you're going to borrow, don't borrow too much, because that's overcapitalization. Don't borrow too little, because that's undercapitalization. Borrow just enough, and make sure you get the right kind of loan. So let's look at the kind of financing that's available. So let's look at some of those and what needs to be done to make sure you don't make the mistake of either overcapitalizing or undercapitalizing. So number one, self-finance. Okay, so let's begin with self-finance. This is a surefire way to get things going. It is best because it has the least amount of challenges and pressure. Where you do not have the money, start with your savings. Instead of asking for how much you need to start, twist the question a little bit, okay? And ask how much is the least amount of money you need to start. Like, what's the lowest? How can you save money? Can you operate from your home? Can you, whatever it takes, whatever it takes. Raise that money. Once you've figured out what is the least amount to start, to literally produce the product or service, then raise that money. Okay? Once you do, plow back all your income into what you are doing and subsidize your business through other incomes. This is why if you work in a job, don't jump from your job into your business before you can sustain your business first and get predictable income, and make sure that that income you're earning is higher than your salary, at least twice, 2 times higher than your salary. And by the way, to know if you've really hit home, you should be able to earn that money over a 6-month period, 3 months in a row, and that shows that you've really hit sustainable levels. So there are times when we have months where you get a fluke, things work out, and then the rest of the time you're broke. What's the point of running a business where 6 months you have no money, 1 month you have money, 5 months you have no money, 2 months you have money? That's not going to work, because then you will always have your workers on credit and things will just be minus, and that's not sustainable, my friends. So you need to have a situation where your business actually is making money. And the only way you can tell if it's making money is to see that at least 3 months in a fiscal year, you are consistently at a certain figure. And that figure is what? Double your salary. Because one of the biggest challenges many people make is they jump into business, but then they have to sustain their livelihood through the business. So in short, the whole lot of themselves as an overhead sits on that business. Now, if that business is too small, if still like a baby, it won't sustain the whole lot of you. And so it will collapse. So that's very reason why you need to make sure you've done your homework. So let's continue. Determine your needs. That's the second thing. Determine your needs. Don't just borrow. Okay? So be very clear whether it's money for operations or for stock. Also, is it short term, which is 6 months, medium term, which is 2 years or longer when you're borrowing? Be very clear about what priorities these finances will address. If you apply the funding wrongly, you end up with debt you cannot pay. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience. So make sure that this money is designated from word go. Not one of those, because I've seen a lot of people, they borrow. First of all, it took forever to borrow. Like the financing, you've been pushing so much for the financing. By the time the financing comes, it doesn't really go to what you initially intended it for. And those are the cases where the money is misallocated. It's not even misused, because misuse entails it was, misappropriated. No, but it's misallocated. There are people who just get excited and go and do silly stuff. Those are not real business people. But real business people will put the money where they need to go. But the problem is sometimes that money goes or is misallocated. And so what ends up happening is it doesn't immediately achieve the objective for which it was borrowed, the objective for which you proved to the financer that this is what we want to do, and you did all your cash 10 flows and things like that and demonstrated clearly, and they said, okay, good, and they got the collateral sorted out, then they did that, whatever, then they finally lend you the money. So what happens with a lot of people is when that money comes, it's probably 2-3 months after the initial application, by which time the needs as they were at the time have changed slightly. And so that money ends up being misallocated. And I assure you, if the money is misallocated, 9 out of 10 times, you will fail to pay it back. And that's where you start having the Tom and Jerry trying to catch up with your debts, pressure from the bank, pressure from wherever, pressure from suppliers, pressure from, so you want to be a bit careful with that. That's what I'll tell you. Do your homework properly. Okay. Number 3, this one I cannot overemphasize. I said it before, I'll say it again. Have a solid business plan in place. I cannot overemphasize just how important this document is. The sad part with many entrepreneurs is that they tend to go seek financing. I need to stress this, listen to that. They tend to go seek financing and then create a business plan after being asked for one. This couldn't be worse. You have got to have a solid plan for your business long before you go looking for financing. You must also have a powerful corporate governance and management structure in place, and must include a solid appendix that gives supporting evidence for all the assumptions that you're making in your business plan. And one more thing, your financials must also be in top shape. This means your systems, your processes, and your corresponding records and reports. This alone is a serious challenge for many startups, and it is another reason they fail to access financing. Because when you want to borrow, I assure you, these guys are going to ask for everything. Where's your invoicing systems? What are your numbers? Where's your trial balance? How many reports have you done? Did you hand in your financials? Do you have 3 years records of financials? Do you have a board? Who's your board members? How often do you meet? When did you last meet? What did you resolve? What was your strategic plan for this year? Can you show us all these things? So you find they ask for a lot. So what happens to a lot of businesses? They start creating these things fakely for the money. This is a problem with a lot of CEC funding. That's exactly what happens. They create all these things to create a picture to borrow the money. But the ground doesn't have any of that. So what ends up happening, of course, is when they get the money, it doesn't go anywhere. The whole thing just collapses because they didn't even have anything that they've demonstrated on those documents. I've seen situations where some people even go and fakely pose in people's offices to pretend it's their office just to borrow money. I mean, if you're going to do things like that, that means already integrity is a 0. How are you going to pay a loan? That's why a lot of loans are not paid. So be genuine about your business and start to put these things in place. Go. There are so many right now, thankfully. There are so many opportunities and setups for incubation and business clinics. And so this is why I always tell people that when you're planning, when you're optimizing your business, ensure you're part of all associations related to your business. All associations, from the big Zakis of this world right down to your sector. So if you're, for example, in the medical space, there is associations for that. If you're in the service provision like consultancy, depends which one it is, there's associations for that. And it's very important to be plugged into all these, because what they do is they help you to stay abreast of developments in your space, which may even include grants. Like seriously, it can include grants as well. You know, grants to help you. For example, if you need a business plan, like seriously, there are times when you have you have organizations like WEAC, which will help give you the whole step-by-step process to which you can set up correctly. So WEAC is Women Enterprise Access Center, run by the State Department, the US State Department. And what happens with those guys, they have been working with so many businesses and gotten them from ideation to get into access to the markets. They've gotten a number of these businesses and connected them also to grants that do stuff like ISBN standardization, consultation, and strategy, like what I do. So they have all these opportunities where there are people who fund that if your business is worthwhile. So this is very important. That's why you see me stressing and telling you that you need to have everything in place. It's not easy, but remember, we're talking about optimization and scaling. We're not talking about starting and validating. No, that is baby phase. But this one of scaling is you become a teenager in the business and you are ready to go to the next level. You've left the under 5 space and you're doing some stuff. So, number 4, find financiers. I need to hurry up, almost done my time. Unlike the general perception, there is funding available if you look hard enough. I'll say that again. Unlike the general perception, and even what I said earlier, there is funding available if you look hard enough. The sad part is that most people just aren't ready for it. In short, they don't prepare adequately. This is the reason why this particular training today is even being done. It is to show that there is indeed financing available, provided those who seek it do their homework in advance. This will minimize the chances of rejection, and as the saying goes, proper planning prevents poor performance. 5 P's. So here in Zambia, we have quite a number of sources for financing. Each one comes with its pros and cons. Overall, your needs and types of business should be key as a factor in determining what kind of financing you should get. Also, do beware that if you acquire financing for wrong reasons, even if it's for your business and have not seriously counted the cost, you risk failing to pay back. So in my next transmission next week, also I think on Wednesday, I will detail some of the available sources for funding in Zambia, as well as their pros and cons. So I spoke about seeking finance today. Now on Wednesday, we'll talk about the various financing sources. You'll be quite surprised there are a number. So the most important thing is just to identify and understand how exactly we can access them. And I've already told you what you need to do on the ground before you go and access the finance. Remember to do your homework. Do your homework. That's usually the biggest problem. So on this note, I want to thank you guys for another wonderful morning, very cold morning, overcast. Those who have solar today, it's one of those challenging days. I hope the sun will come out, but it doesn't look like it. So either way, thank you so much for being part of us, and make sure you go watch this video again, pause it, take note of all the things I've said, because I've said a lot. And with a bit of resilience, you can actually be able to do wonders. So from myself, thank you so much, guys. Have a great day, and God richly bless you. Cheerio.